A mystery spoken of the apple of my eye, a sheer death in galaxy and mind in one's own, through death in aesthetics and a mind in one's own point of reason, by galaxies should they not have been, through realities and non-realities of points of reason then, only through a sheer responsibility of one's own death by the mind of one's own, by possibility within the knowing of one's own knowledge. And saying by this aesthetic of a world, the woman who was she, and she was the one responsible for those who had died, and saying in their consummation of death by one's own mind and the teeth of one's own soul, saying those people are only misunderstandings of objects by one's own perception of a reality, and saying your reality was a misunderstanding of one concept, meaning the Moni concept upon one's death of one's own mind, and saying through a sheer depths of responsibility through knowledge in one's own mind, only by possibility couldn't one have seen them. Only through a sheer consummation of one's own object, by the prospect of one's own giving or misgiving of knowledge. And saying the point of one's reason was for one to believe in oneself by a point of conceptification only through sheer knowledge in one's own mind. And saying by the perception of one's own aesthetic by a knowledge within one's own self, one's shadow of doubt was then consummated by the knowledge within their own self by their knowledge. Only through the knowing of their knowledge by a perception of the aesthetic of the object with which they consumed, this being the apple of the original fruit, and saying the original fruit was a consummation of all knowledge, only through sheer perception of reality, only by one possible mindset, where the mindset was a simple reason for one to believe in oneself by the point of knowledge within their own mind, only through sheer conceptification and knowledge, only through the concepts and conceptions of mind's own reason, and saying your reason was a possibility within yourself not to believe in God, and saying your God was a death in galaxy what shouldn't have been so, only by the point of one's own misunderstanding, only by perceptions of objects through sheer representation, and the representation was a knowledge within the mind of one's own self, and the consummation of their knowledge was the mindset of their own being, and saying by a responsibility of one's own knowledge through their own perception of the original fruit as conceived of knowledge, knowing that they will die and then they will become people who are then subject to the subjective experiences of knowledge within themselves of themselves, and the deaths of their innocence shall be the point of their reason then. Only a mystery in one's own galaxy by the madness within their own suppositions of concepts through realities not known to them, and the possibility of any known language was a real responsibility for one to believe in oneself by the point of their reason, only through sheer depths of galaxy and mind in one's own, only by the possibility of one's own conception of one's own object, through the sheer depth perception of madness within their own mind, and saying the madness was the death of their innocence by a prospect by which they shall show themselves a sheer representation of their own knowledge, only in their own knowledge that they should show themselves a real reason for them to believe in their own minds by a possibility, and saying as you sit there and cook crack upon the stove, and say we will consume this crack later on, only an irresponsibility of yours, for your ability not to believe in yourself by your attitude towards what could have been so, only through sheer responsibility and mind in one's own, for I am the concept of death and a possibility of one's own mind to believe in oneself, and saying by your sheer irresponsibility of the addiction, and saying the addiction of mindset of one's own, of which I made a promise to her who was Aaron, and only by a point of my reason, one's death in galaxy and one shouldn't have been so, only by the possibility of one's own mind to believe in oneself. Thus, therefore, only one possibility must be so. One's depths of galaxy must be the conception of one's own knowledge through the perception of their aesthetic by a knowledge, only through sheer madness and one's own reason to believe in themselves, only by the possibility of sadness within their own minds. And saying upon yourself in your drug addiction, you shall suffer for the reasons that you have lived for, and the alcohol consumed the people who believe themselves to be sober, only by the possibility in which their minds shall become more than they have ever been before, only by the possibility that what they consume is not real, and yet they believe it to be a reality, only by the responsibility of their own minds not to believe in themselves through a perception of their own object, and this object was the original fruit, saying the alcohol is then taken of them their innocence, and they shall become unwise like creatures of the night, and saying points of their reason that they have become unwise only through perceptions of aesthetics of objects of which they can no longer see, for the alcohol has clouded their vision and they have become unwise people by the depths of galaxy and the mind of God, saying only by a responsibility of their own reason. Now necessary it was for me to state only one possibility of one conception must be so, through the sheer depths of galaxy and mind in one's own through the knowledge of their own mind, the alcoholism of one consumed by the other, and the sheer abuse of it For the abuse then created by the alcohol was made of the abuse of your partner, and your partner had been abused by you for your alcohol abuse, and saying your irresponsibility of death in mind was your necessary problem for you to believe in so. Only by the perception of your knowledge, and saying your knowledge was the consummation of all logic, only through sheer concepts of reason for one to believe oneself by the doubt of their own mind, should the possibility exist that they could become more than what was possible than what they had seen before, only by an unknowing of how to perceive themselves through a sheer complexion of their own mind, saying through irresponsibility they had become unwise in the eyes of God, only by a necessary problem of them to their alcoholism and their inability not to work upon themselves, and say through the sheer depths of knowledge, my mindset will become wise and I will research and become someone who is much more, and saying by your research and a point of knowledge and the introspection you might possess, and saying upon your abilities to do these things you should become wiser and more real than the other people around you, and you shall know more of how to behave around them, so that you can become unwise like them. You shall never become so, should you have transcended any possibility of your reason, should you not fall back into alcoholism, and the destruction of your brain shall be a point of your reason to believe in yourself by the knowledge within your own aesthetic, by a perception of reality through one's own mind's time, and saying your sheer responsibility of time and space in a necessary galaxy of one's own reason, only through the sheer depths of responsibility by one's own mind. Only one possibility could be so, for one necessary problem exists. One reason for one to believe in oneself and one reason to die. A mystery of one thing, and all I say is y'all motherfuckers can't rap. All points of reason, death in galaxy, and what shouldn't have been known. Only by the perception of a sheer intelligence through possibility of one's own mind, saying the 84th person, and 84th person that you do view yourself, and saying the old wise man of your consummation was a death in logic by the mind of one's own, for he knew Allah was the one God, and saying by irresponsibility few words had spoken of him, and he was the one responsible for his death in his own mind, only by the possibility of one's own conception of logic, and saying your logic of point of reason was the death of the galaxy through sheer perception of time, only by the knowledge of your own mind, and saying through your sheer responsibility of death of galaxy, and only one possibility to believe in oneself, you shouldn't have found yourself within your own mind through a perception of your reality by the point of your reason. Well, let it be said so only by the consummation of your logic, and you have then become someone who is unwise only through a perception of knowledge within your own mind by the perception of your own innocence and the death of your mind, saying your irresponsibility in the belief that the death of your innocence was really your adulthood, when in reality it was the mindset of your own not realizing that the world was good, and saying by an irresponsibility of God for he would not make evil, and saying through the sheer necessity of one for someone to understand this proclamation was the deaths of the galaxy within one's own mind by the logic within them own selves. Only through sheer responsibility of one's own mind by the point of the reason was I not irresponsible for what I had done before, and necessary that I was to state for no wrong have I committed, as flawless of the woman that I was, and woman that I am. Only through sheer irresponsibility of your perception of aesthetic, and you have found yourself a drawing point of reason to believe in yourself, only through the drawl upon yourself like the drool upon your mouths. As you cannot find these suppositions of concepts within your own mind by the answers looking thereof, and saying within your own mind are the answers you are searching for, only by a possibility of knowledge, and why should you be old to come to those reasons only through your life experience and death of your knowledge? Also saying the time consumed of those books, and the books that you shall consume upon your alcoholism and sobriety, and you consume upon those books looking for a reason to believe in yourself by the point of your necessity, only through wisdom that you should accumulate through life experience and hard times that you shall go through. And the hard times are really an irresponsibility of your own mind not to believe in yourself for your eerie complexity of a point of reason not to believe in your own mind. And saying that through the sheer life experience of decades and years, and the possibility of your own mind to believe through others, by the point of your reason that which you should have interacted with them, should you learn nothing of this and do no introspection whatsoever for years, you shall become unwise and more like the alcoholic who was brain dead to begin with. Only by the responsibility of your own mind not to believe in yourself through sheer introspection of your own mind. And who shall come for you? For you have nobody in this world, and all you have is yourself, should you not? And say by the point of solipsism you still collect yourself around others, and you collect yourself around them, saying these people will allow me to escape from myself, like the alcoholism that once took me before. And saying as a result of this, because you took from your alcoholism now a consummation of other people, and saying through something like Narcotics Anonymous and you spend your time with them, only by the perception of your knowledge within your own mind or anybody you spend time with, even your own family, saying you are irresponsible of what it is that you have done for them for unwise that you had been, and unwise that you are now for not the responsibility you had taken upon your weakness in your abuse of the alcohol and all that you had done before. Yet still you would say, oh irresponsibility for what couldn't have been so, for I have hurt in my life, and saying people have hurt me and abused me and taken from me, for what shall I do for them? And saying by an irresponsibility you simply cannot control the level of your language and behavior to a point of reason where you shall become wise and they will become unwise. Only through the sheer perception of your own mind by the knowledge of your aesthetic. Only through madness within your own self by the point of your reason to believe in yourself through a knowledge. Only through necessity in one's own mind through sheer complexion of knowledge. And the complexion of my skin was black only through the point of reason I was the Mexican black woman of outer space. Only through minds of own reason and the ends of space of the place that I go, this was my story of time. And saying upon my story of time I shall become more wise than anyone who has ever been. And saying upon my old age I shall spoketh about. And saying the spoketh of my mind with the high pitch of my voice and a near point of my reason through the depths of my galaxy and the lowness of my voice. What shall be said of so? For the point of my reason was the death of my galaxy, only by woman that I was in a mind and my own reason to believe in myself. And mystery was it not, only through a perception of an aesthetic. Well shan't it be not for, and point of my reason not to believe in myself by the depths of my galaxy, only through a sheer perception of madness. And the death of my galaxy was a sheer point of reason through one's own mind. And the complexion of your mind was the necessity of your problem. For the races of people who quarrel about and say we are different than one another when God only views them as men and women. In the eyes of God, you are only one man or one woman, and you are irresponsible for what you had done to the other people. And though you could consummate around spirits that you should believe in before you had known of the knowledge of Allah, and saying the Holy Quran was the gift for you from Allah, and saying He has given you a reason to believe in yourself beyond your point of death, and the death of galaxy, for I am death, and a point in your reason, only through the sheer conception of realization for a point of madness within your own self. What shall be known of a reason not to believe in yourself through the depths of your galaxy and the mind of your own, only by one possibility not to know of your truth, and saying through your depression and lackadaisical nature, you shall become unwise, and a reason for you to believe in yourself, you should dedicate yourself to nothing, and your time spent will be by doing nothing, and you spend your days in an irresponsibility of constantly thinking and worrying about what might happen next, for you must work as an adult, and saying as the irresponsibility you had never taken the time through introspection and isolation to believe in yourself by a knowledge within your own mind, and knowing of yourself how your mind should work, and saying the knowing of yourself that all men and women are once the same yet different than one another in the eyes of the dragon who is the lonely dragon. Only by one possibility this was the son of Allah, and a reason for one to believe in myself, only that this was a woman, and a point of your knowledge not to believe in your own mind through your own conception of reality, and your reality was a misunderstanding of knowledge. Only by the misunderstanding of knowledge was your point of reason not to believe in yourself through a conception of your reality by the apple of the original fruit by which you shall not consume, and point of your reason you have been chastised of the original fruit, and you shall never consume it, for you have then thus taken the death of your innocence as adulthood upon yourself rather than the goodness of the world. Well, mystery couldn't say so, only by one possibility. Mystery and knowledge, one and owns reason, and the mystery and knowledge of your own reason was the death of your galaxy, only by the sheer conception of your madness by the point of your time through then, and the mystery of your mind was the death of your galaxy, only by one's perception of madness, and the vampire consummation of reality and non-knowledge, only through Oshino Shinobu and a point of reason, death and galaxy, by one's own mind and one's perception of an aesthetic, through one's own mind not to believe in oneself by the consummation of their own mind. For your conception of your own mind is simply that you are a man and nothing else, and your thoughts are consummated and only the same as anybody else, for you are an irresponsibility of your own mind not to believe in your own conception of reality, and that you are not different than one another, only by a possibility, and your only consummation was your life experience or death that shall make you different upon the other people, and saying upon your life experience or death, or your behavior or your language, and your possibility of reason to believe in oneself by the region of the earth you were born upon, and it was your responsibility to think you were different than one another, only in the eyes of God by being one and all. and saying one and own you are only men and women, only by the possibility of a sheer complexion of a mind. And your disregard for the other races upon yourself through a conception of an aesthetic was a misunderstanding of the people around you for not being only as men and women, only by the sheer differences of knowledge that you couldn't see beyond this point through a sheer 84th person of knowledge by a point of reason, and saying through sheer deperception for I was the 84th person, only by the possibility of knowledge that none should be different from one another, and only in the eyes of Allah shall one die, and saying by irresponsibility you still must consummate among people of your own race and they will become your lovers, and by a possibility of your own knowledge, a red-pilling of mindset will only pervade about you, and you shall become unwise like the rest of them. Only through the red pilling of your own mind by the possibility of your own knowledge, and saying by the 84th person you shall become wise as the old man, who sits atop the mountain and shall know of the truth. And when you spoke to him upon climbing the mountain, and you say to him as a young man, what shall I do with my life? And my life is an irresponsibility of my own mind, for I place it upon you now for giving me the answers of a point of reason. And he said to you, you shall die alone, and your possibility of knowledge is that you will know the truth. Only by the conception, for all your lovers shall be gone, and all that will be left is you by the end of your life. And your irresponsibility not to believe in yourself as I atop the mountain, only through a sheer complexion of knowledge, that one point of reason was my point of reason, and years have I spent, and wasn't I a smoker of cigarettes? Only my knowledge that now I have quit, and the necessity for me was only to spend one day at a time through a perception of my knowledge by the point of my reason then, only by the consummation of logic for one's own sheer perception of knowledge, and you shall fall for it. For you are an irresponsible and a stranger to me. Only by the stranger of you are knowledge, and you shall die alone. And your people I do not understand, for they are younger than me and unwise, and they suffer from the technologies and reasons and abilities of people I never understood before. For I was born long ago, and you were born only recently. Only by your conception of knowledge that you shall die alone, without yourself and no girlfriend whatsoever. Well, mystery couldn't have been stated that your marriage upon yourself, and through your sheer knowledge that you have spent with your wives upon places, and should you not have been divorced, only by the conception of your knowledge that you shall become unwise like the rest of them, only in your sheer knowledge that you are a one man, and your one man is to the irresponsibility of knowledge by my 84th person of knowledge, only through a perception of knowing of the aesthetic and a mind in one's own reason of the object of the original fruit, only through sheer consummation of mind. And what point of my reason was the death of my galaxy? Only by the perception of my object through one's own sheer point of doubt. Well necessary it was for me to state, one point of reason was the death of one's galaxy by the knowledge of their own mind, and through sheer conceptions of knowledge, only one possibility of consummation must exist for knowledge of point, of reason, and death in galaxy. Well, let it be known by the apple of my fruit and a reason for me to believe in myself, a point of my reason not quelling upon myself through the earth of my mind, and saying through sheer irresponsibility of death's galaxy, the old wise man was merely a man and nothing more, and saying he was nothing more than you, for you are a young man and irresponsible that you are, and pointing your reason you have not been quelled by the age of your mind, and saying the decades and years he had fell upon shall now fall upon you, and you shall become like him, for when you are old you will see the error of your ways, should you not have been blind or your brain not have been bad. And still you understand that death cannot be understood. Well, necessary reason for was it so, as my 84th person and being death itself, for I'm the only person in the world who understands death really how it works, and saying I will explain now how death works. The way death works is that death is the mindset of one's own reason not to believe in oneself by the point of their quelling through a sheer conception of knowledge of the ending of their own mind, and the sheer lives or years of experience that they suffered from shall be gone and not for, as the souls of the exiting of their bodies was a point of reason, and they exit into their deaths like a point of reason of exit death, only by the mindset of their own reason. And the point of the deathing and quelling of my 84th person in knowledge and 11 Dan Go player that I was, only through conception of knowledge by one's own mind, and by the possibility of their deaths, the ending of themselves upon the blossoming of themselves as an adult, has allowed them to peruse themselves to the sheer knowledge of their own mind by a maturation, and the maturation has allowed them to see upon themselves that when they lie upon the ground or die a glorious battle in death, a glorious death in battle, A point of the reason shall show them only one reason was meant for it, and the reason was their lover and who it was that they loved, only by one monogamous relationship, and who was your ultimate lover, for penultimately mustn't it have been so. And polyamory was a sin in the eyes of God by a point of reason only through sheer conceptions of knowledge, and yet lovers of Aphrodite that I was, only by one consummation one husband do I possess, and he is the one I love. That's how death works. I just explained. I just solved how death works. Just by talking. I am death. I solved fucking death. Just now. I mean, for years, you people trying to solve fucking death. I just did it. Also, the angels are warlocks and minds in one's own reason, only by the conception of one's own object. All angels are warlocks with 3/16 of the population by the knowledge of Allah through a Quranic message, and doomed to go through the Quran ad nauseum, are they not? And saying through irresponsibility of one's own mind by the conception of one's own logic, the angels or warlocks of humans shall be known of reason, and saying their conception of knowledge was a mind in one's own reason, and isolated that I was for no one who knows who I am, by the conception of my logic through a sheer madness within my own mind. Yet not mad that I was. I paint my nails black. I'm emo, you know. I'm an emo girl. I'm also a black woman. That's the second part. But we talk about that all the time. This is episode 9. We're filming episode 9. Mystery in my galaxy upon her who was Kichi, and mystery that she was the one who loved me. And by the knowledge of my loving of her, only through a perception of reason by knowledge that I was her herself. And the point of reason that she was not Allah, only a point of reason for me to believe in myself. And I as the son of Allah who was possessed by Allah, and he is the possession of Allah, and that I am. And saying by a point of my reason, it was my responsibility to provide upon you one textbook, and the answers provided for a necessary reason. And why shall I become upon a knowing of literature and knowledge? Only by the conception of my aesthetic that one should be able to spoketh of so. And the spoketh of your knowledge was a point of your reason through sheer road of knowledge. And the road of your language of nor was a point of your mystery not to believe in yourself by the conception of your reality of death. And the death of your reality was a mindset within your own self through points of reason, only by the knowledge within your own mind through sheer complexion of knowledge and the complexities of your own mind by a conception of your logic. And saying by the logic you do consume only through sheer mind, a possibility of real reason exists. For the reason of yourself by the point of reason of your mindset, and the mindset of your consummation of logic, was really a depth perception of the apple of the original fruit in a mindset within your own mind, only by the possibility of the 84th person through a conception of reality by looking upon yourself from the outside and seeing you are wrong. Only by real reason. Also neuristic thoughts pervasive about. Mystery and conceptification, only through one sheer perception of mind. A reality and death of galaxy and point of my reason then, one possibility exists and only one's reason couldn't have been so. Only through sheer knowledge and knowing. One possibility of mindset and real reason to believe in oneself by the conception of their knowledge. And the conception of their knowledge was a point of their reason within themselves. For though this textbook I must write, and a point of my knowledge I know that I am, only through death that I couldn't be, and saying for I as death am the irresponsibility of mankind by their possession of knowledge within them own selves, only through one sheer perception of logic within their own minds. And the near possibility of the reciprocity of mindset within themselves was a mutual friendships upon their knowing of selves. For in the ancient world friendships were communicated about, and saying points of reason they had created friendships by their mindsets and their loving of the spirits of their world, and saying as Allah had placed the world upon themselves, and say you shall suffer alone and you shall die alone, you are an irresponsibility of mankind, yet still peruse of friendships that they had, and still points of reason they consume their friendships, more so than the Holy Quran, and death in their galaxy what God shouldn't have said so, only by one possibility of their own minds, and sheer depths of galaxy of reason. Well, little did it matter not, for one possibility was the real perception of time, only by one consummation of logic through reason, And the reason was your fucking reason to believe in yourself by the necessity point of your quelling. And the quelling was your mindset within your own self through a conception of knowledge, only through the sheer perception of reality that you shouldn't exist, or nor exist as I do upon the world, and saying upon myself through the reason of myself, only one consummation of knowledge should know things. And the knowing of my mind was the point of my reason by the aesthetic of objects perceived. Of the original fruit and point of my reason, all objects must be separated of one another by the inseparable concepts of mind, for those concepts are inseparable, and by points of reason one shouldn't have been possible, for near necessity and problematic mindsets of real reason. Only through sheer necessity of galaxy, and the Hegelian was a mindset, for George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was my ex-husband, and he was born in the 1700s, only by a point of my reason that I might have been Jean Valjean in another life, and seeing as I am him now, only by one possibility of Oshino Shinobu and Etwa star in you and a point of my reason, only through depths of galaxy in one's own mind. And the vampire shall consume me in a reason by myself, and saying consume upon their deaths as the lonely or ender dragon that I am, and possibility of my own reason then. The lonely dragon was a consummation of the deaths of people by the knowledge of one's own uterus through a conception of an aesthetic. And the uterus of mine was a limitation of my body through conception of mindsets, only through one possibility of mine to bleed upon myself and say these eggs shall become blood and they shall become people should I be impregnated. Also, pregnant that I might be, I really don't know. Alright, so we're gonna take a quick smoke break. Because I'm fucking fiending for a cigarette, man. I'm fiending for a butt. I'm gonna go have a cigarette now. Mystery of folly and a point of your reason was the apple of my eye and conceptions of logic. By the apple of my eye that your suffering shall be a point of my reason within my own self. One decimation of knowledge through a perception of your aesthetic was the mystery of your point of reason then, only in the madness of your own mind by the perception of your aesthetic through your knowledge, and saying your consummation of logic was a real reason for knowledge, and saying the knowledge perceptified of what books you consume, and the books of knowledge pervading about in your minds, and saying the thoughts you conceive of, and the thoughts of your reason and how you shall live, by the limitation of your bodies and the thoughts of your consciousness, and how should your death work upon yourself, when death I had already explained how it works in a point of your reason then, only through sheer conceptions of knowledge by the 84th person of the 11 non-Go player who was the old wise man, and still a woman that she was, for she was Kichi and Lady Iwakura, only by the perception of knowledge of one's own aesthetic of the object of the original fruit, for this was the apple of my eyes, and the apple of my eyes was a conception of knowledge. One pure reason to believe in myself by the peer of the weak, and the weak was a point of my reason by the acorn of said misunderstanding, and the misunderstanding of the acorn was a conception of the aesthetic through the knowledge of the mind, and the mind was a conception of the aesthetic through sheer pure reason and a point of my misunderstanding of knowledge, and the misunderstanding of myself, for I suffer the fear of being misunderstood, by a possibility of real reason to believe in myself by the kikuo sound of my quelling of one own who was Megumine and point of my reason then. Only through a sheer conception of knowledge, she was in love with the South Korean man, Angel Samosu, by sheer depths of galaxy and mind of one's own, for I was not her and I am her. Only through a sheer conception of knowledge and mind's own reason. One possibility mustn't be pervasive upon oneself through sheer conception of realities in mind, and the non-realities pervasive about creating things like madness and points of reason of galaxies within the minds of one's own, saying irresponsibility was the minds of those sadness. And though sadness was a point of my reason for a point of their misery, and the people's about, and the people's quelling themselves upon themselves through a sheer point of reason, was a death in their galaxy and a mind in their own by a point of their knowledge within themselves, only through a sheer wisdom of mind. And the wisdom of the mind was the point of a reason by one's own object of affection, and the infection was the lover of Aphrodite, and saying he was the man who was the one, and saying he was the possibility of all reason to believe in myself by a husband within my own self then, and Lini Wakura's husband prevented, only through one sheer irresponsibility of my own mind, and ring upon my finger that I should dawn of him, and saying he had given this to me through a point of reason, as through the universe and a sheer complexity of knowledge, by one's own mind and one's own reason. My husband is a real man and a point of reason. What shouldn't have been mindset for point of reason and death? What shouldn't have been mindset for the quelling of one's own mind, and the possibility of near knowledge through one's conception of an aesthetic of a knowledge, and saying your knowledge of knowing was a misunderstanding of representation, for the language of Nora was only known by Lane, and your conception of points of reason was the beauty of your beautiful girls upon yourself through a reason of yourself, and saying through the sheer high class of it all and a point of reason that you should become different, and not wild of the ancient people once was, and saying these people are no longer wild and have become of societies and reasons and states, and saying irresponsibility that they look to the government for their answers rather than within their own minds and a points of reason how they collect themselves among themselves, not through a tribal nature, but through a point of reason to believe in themselves by their necessity, and the necessity of God put them there for a reason, and saying Allah has then provided the book, the Holy Quran for you so that you can see this, only through a conception of your own mind. And necessary was it for me to say so. Y'all motherfuckers ain't shit. Except my lovely viewers. My lovely viewers. My lovely, lovely viewers. My lovely, lovely viewers. Also my family. My family's fucking dope. Only through sheer complexity of knowledge should your mastery of the skill be a point of your reason, and upon your mastery of a skill, saying through sheer complexity of knowledge and hours sunk into the moment, hours sunk into the skill that you possess in a point of your reason. This is your worship of Allah in some kind of way, by the necessity of your knowledge through one's own perception, and the perception of your mind by the apple of the original fruit of the necessity of your concept, and by the knowing of the weak of one's own aesthetic through the fear of being misunderstood, of the conception of knowledge of how you shall not be understood by your knowledge in isolation within one's own mind, and isolated upon a massive planet of galaxies, and necessary for the reason of said so, for the depths of the galaxies and the planet you possess by the moon upon your knowing, and upon your knowing was a conception of reality only through sheer time. I'm beautiful as the stars or the suns or the galaxies or the moon, and possibility that the sky shall falleth upon rain, and the rain for what I have become, for I am the rain and Atashi wa Ame, by a point of reason through near necessity of knowledge and a necessity in my galaxy, only through one conception of nor reality and a point of my reason. One possibility through consummation exists by the solipsisms of points of reason by the knowledge within them themselves, and the concepts of necessity by the logic of one's own mind, through sheer isolation of concepts and misunderstanding of knowledge. Only by one possibility to believe in oneself through a conception of reality by one's own point of reason. And saying the death of galaxies was the necessity of concepts, for the concepts are misunderstandings of necessities only through perceptions of time by the objects within them own selves, only through sheer concept of knowledge and mind's own reason. And the vampire of points of reason by the deaths of galaxies and not blood that I consume, but the deaths of people through the dragon that I am not, for a point of my reason and death in my mind. One conception of knowledge must be so, for the recordings upon myself in Death and Galaxy, yet not that a recording could be recorded, only through sheer complexity of one's own mind by the knowledge within them own selves, and the implications of all of it. O inceptions of reason shall not be real, in points of reason that one concept could be so, and the necessity of the galaxy was a mystery in one's own mind, by the perceptions of realities of one's own time through one's own self. And mystery and madness, which upon yourself and which upon your world, which upon your place of reason, and the broomstick of a death of galaxy, and the broomstick of a mind's own reason, and the broomstick of a point of reason by the potion seller who. I just said potion seller. Remember that video? I just said potion seller. Remember that fucking Skyrim video? He's like potion seller, potion seller. Give me your strongest potions. Give me your strongest potions. Give me your strongest potions. Give me your strongest. That's fucking funny as shit. I can't believe I just said that. I'm like, bro. One conception of knowledge and death in mind. One conception of reality. And oh, the holocaust of it all was a necessity irresponsible of Lane, and she took responsibility for the deaths of the Jews and the points of reason, but only by their deaths and consummation of them. And the consuming of those deaths was a point of reason that she should say, irresponsible for her love of the Jews and death in reality. The deaths of reality a point of reason in mind's own self, only through one conception of knowledge. Wasn't the Holy Quran a necessity prospect of death or reason? And the points of their reason was the deaths of those people, saying that here irresponsible of the Holocaust and necessary realities, through all wars permitted through time, pervasive of this one war of World War II and World War I, which was a good war, and saying by irresponsibility of mindsets, she fought alongside the Americans as Kichi, who was then son of Allah by a point of reason, in necessity in one's own mind on the float of sheer perception. For I am the one responsible for this, should I not be so? Well necessary it was for me to state, by my irresponsibility of one's own mindset, I shall have giveth them the original fruit for them to eat upon, and they shall be the only peoples of the world who eat upon it. And saying through a sheer depths of galaxy, all knowledge of known shall only be the death of their innocence in the maturation of themselves into their deaths, by a prospect of their only misunderstanding of reality, and not knowing of the Holy Quran by Allah the one God, should they be Jewish, and points of their reason having been forgiven for this, by a perception of reality, Allah has shown them they are beautiful people in a concept of their own minds, and the death of their own was a possibility within their own selves. Only one sheer conception of knowledge must have been so. Misgivings of reality and misgivings of gifts, and the gifts upon yourself through the misgivings of knowledge. Only one conception of mindset out of this world and in a point of reason, only through sheer conception of mind. One's own possibility was the conception of logic through a mindset of one's own reason, and the impossibility of the impossible, for the impossibility possibly of the impossible, was a necessity within the self, for the impossible was possible only through the breaking of the laws of physics, by the death of the Allah thing through a conception of knowledge, and her death upon herself as the South Korean girl through knowledge upon one's own mind, in necessity and reason. One's own misunderstanding of knowledge was actually the perception of an aesthetic through the object of the original fruit by the original fruit of the sin. And the sin couldn't have been real, for God had made no evil. And saying by irresponsibility your maturation was the death of your innocence, which is an evil. And by the prospect of your minds, you shall see the maturation of yourselves was a conception of the knowledge of good and a pureness of heart, only through fighting of the battles of reality. And saying the battles of reality are your atheism pervasive about, creating the nihilisms within inside your own mind and thoughts of your death. And the thoughts of your death have made a nihilism, so that God shan't you believe in the Holy Quran was a message from you, saying only in one perception of reason should not the Son of Allah have shown you. One possibility of truth must be so, and this is that Allah is the one God and you must worship Him. Only by perceptions of reality, and she was not God. I am Iwakura, and it is my responsibility to let the world know I am Iwakura. So through sheer complexity of knowledge and madness, one perception of death's own reason, and depth's own reason of the deaths of galaxies and minds of own, only through sheer conceptions of logic. And logical was the point of my reason to a conception of reality by one's own mind, only through sheer depth perception of mind and one's own knowing, of the aesthetic of the object of the apple by the acorn of said original fruit by the pure heart of the weak in the mindset of Aphrodite, and saying by sheer responsibility of one's own concept, the necessary problems could have been so through a sheer conception of reality, and the possibility of one's own mind was the death of a speech given upon oneself through the sheer complexion of reality of a recording, and necessary it was for me to state, for right upon my textbook, about 400 pages in size of a printer paper, only one possibility to believe in myself by a knowledge, saying this is the only way I can communicate with the fucking world.